What is up, fantasy people? Welcome back to the True North Fantasy Pod. As always, I am Trav, coming live from a secret lair within the True North, secret location within the True North Fantasy lair. And of course, you saw me thrown off a little bit. I'm actually riding solo today. I don't have Ty with me co-hosting and West Coasting. So while I will miss him, I know he did need to take this week off, so it is all good. I'm going to be riding solo today, so I hope you enjoy the content. We are, of course, a part of the Fantasy Points Media Group. They are busy over there at fantasypoints.com. Please support fantasypoints.com. That is the best way to support us, the True North Fantasy Podcast. They've got their prospect guide. The 2022 prospect guide dropped today, Friday, April the 1st, and that is not an April Fool's joke, people. They got tons in there, like hundreds of evaluations from Greg Cosell, one of the goats of the prospect evaluation industry. And then Wes Huber, one of our faves from the Fantasy Points team, also has a ton of work in there. Devy rankings, tons and tons of prospect information. And for me, somebody who was a little bit behind on my rookie process this year, I will say that their live shows that they've been doing, as well as that prospect guide, is going to be a large part of how I do my rookie evaluations this season. Not to mention tomorrow, April the 2nd, which is when you might be listening to this episode, they're dropping PGA content. I'm a big golf guy myself, and I'm really excited. They did a staff reveal and brought on 4 deadly PGA analysts this year. So tomorrow morning, April the 2nd, there is going to be a show with Joe Dolan and one of the analysts from the PGA content side talking about what they offer there. So if you're a golf head, much like myself, please go check it out. The golf package is live and ready to go, and that Discord channel is bumping. So fantasypoints.com, our promo code TrueNorth22 will get you 10% off of your 2022 subscription. Again, that promo code is TrueNorth2022. Helps us, helps them. Let's get W's this year, right? So this week, guys, I'm going to talk a little bit of tight ends. Last week, we talked wide receiver trade and free agency impact. Ty and myself did. We had the shows lined up to be quarterbacks next and then running back, tight end together. But since Ty couldn't be here, I didn't want to take the quarterbacks and the running backs off of his plate because those are a lot of fun to talk about. So I'm just going to ride through some of these tight ends and just give you kind of some of the impacts that we see from the free agent signings or some of the trades that we've seen. A little bit less on the trade front from the tight end side of things, but some of these free agent signings are some of them good, some of them bad, some of them look good when they might not be so good. And so I'm going to kind of break down a little bit of that for you and hopefully clear that picture up. So the first group I'm going to start with is the guys that returned to their previous team. So these are guys that re-signed with the team they were at in 2021. And the first guy we're going to talk about is Zach Ertz. I am all too familiar with Zach Ertz from his days in Philadelphia. I am an Eagles fan. The guy started his career off with 3 tight end 1 performances. Actually, sorry, he started off with a tough performance, and then he's had 4 top 5 tight end performances in his first 5 seasons. So not too bad for Zach Ertz, who is getting a little bit older in the tooth as far as tight ends go. But we know that some of those guys, especially one who is a volume guy and not an athleticism guy, can maybe stick it out a little bit longer and find his place in an offense. And I think for that reason, Zach Ertz re-signing with the Arizona Cardinals keeps him in that top 10 conversation. I actually currently have him as my tight end 9 on the season for 2022. And I think barring injury, that's a fairly safe bet. You look at last season after he got shipped off to Arizona. He started there in week 7, and immediately he became an important piece of that offense. His first game as a Cardinal, he finished as the tight end 6 on the season. He had 5 targets, 3 receptions for 66 yards and a touchdown. And like that is a solid weekly line for a tight end if you're not investing in the top 5. Those are the guys that you're looking for, you know what I mean? The guys who can score touchdowns within their offense and get a little bit of volume, even if they're not getting double-digit targets per game. But overall, he played 10 games with the Arizona Cardinals, and in those 10 games, he was the tight end 5 overall in those 10 games, and that actually surged him to have a tight end 6 finish on the season. After in the first 6 weeks, he was the tight end 15 with the Philadelphia Eagles. 7 of those 10 games with the Arizona Cardinals were in the top 12. So there's a little bit of upside that came that we didn't necessarily see before, and I think a lot of that kind of bears out in the Cardinals offense. just a little bit more to stack on to the feather in his cap. He led the team in targets for Arizona over those 10 weeks, receptions and touchdowns. He was second on the team in yardage, and he commanded a 21% share of the team's targets, which that's fat with a PH as far as tight ends go. So we really, really like the fact that he came in and commanded targets, got chemistry with Kyler Murray, and he's just going to try and continue that in 2022. And I think we can expect more of the same. Of course, last year he did not have DeAndre Hopkins soaking up targets, soaking up touchdowns. So DeAndre Hopkins will come in and be a factor. I think like he's going to come back to being a top 10 wide receiver this season. But I think if you look at the offset, Christian Kirk, AJ Green, and Chase Edmonds are all gone, each of which saw significant targets at various points throughout the season last year. So I think at worst right now, Zach Ertz is third on this target totem pole in Arizona, with Rondale creeping in there. But I think most likely Zach Ertz is second right now. Another note I would have with Arizona is I do expect them to add another tight end, or another wide receiver to the crop. AJ Green could potentially come back, but if it's a free agent or if it's a rookie, I think they'll probably need a bit of grace period to get acclimated and build some chemistry with Kyler Murray. And I think that only bodes well for Zach Ertz. So I would be targeting him as like the last of that tier of startable tight ends who I think is going to land inside that top 10. So Zach Ertz, viable top 10 tight end with the Arizona Cardinals this season. Moving along, two of my favorite, like absolute favorite later round tight ends this season are Robert Tonyan and David Njoku. Last season, towards mid-season or so, we were seeing some flashes from David Njoku, and I was shouting his name from the rooftops as a guy who needed to be added in Dynasty. He, of course, was a free agent, so I was looking at the potential for him moving on, maybe more of a high-powered offense, obviously less depth chart competition, where he had Harrison Bryant and Austin Hooper in that Cleveland Browns offense, but we didn't necessarily get the new situation. He didn't sign elsewhere. He signed back with the Cleveland Browns, but Austin Hooper is now gone. So that depth chart is a little bit cleared up. We expect David Njoku to play over Harrison Bryant, maybe not necessarily in blocking situations, but I think this team's going to have a ton of 12 personnel coming on the field this year. They've been one of the higher in that department over the past few seasons, and nothing's going to change there with Kevin Stefanski at the helm. Those two running backs at the helm, those tight ends are a big help in the run game, and then you can disguise a lot in the passing game with being such a run-heavy team and having two tight ends on the field. They also brought in Deshaun Watson. That's like a huge, huge piece. We're going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk quarterbacks, but he does project to take this offense to another level for the long term. That contract that David Njoku got was only 1 year, but it's about $11 million. So the long term for him doesn't quite look as clear, but for 2021, he's still great. And I'm still into him in Dynasty as that young athletic tight end who gets plunked into a high powered offense and could have that explosion. So, if we're looking at the Watson thing, we could see Baker Mayfield start some games for the Browns this year, which is a shit show in itself. I'm not going to weigh in necessarily on that right now, but I think that's totally okay for David Njoku, because you look at the Browns offense, and like I said, they have a lot of two tight end sets, and their offense, especially the passing game, is kind of centered around the tight end. The Browns have been top 5 in tight end targets overall in each of the past 2 seasons, top 3 in target share to the tight end over those 2 years as well, 29% last year and 30% the season before to tight ends. And a fun stat is that in the red zone last season, Cleveland Browns tight ends soaked up 46% of the target share. So when the Cleveland Browns were passing, almost 50% of the time, it was going to a tight end near pay dirt. So we like that for tight ends. Obviously, like last season was a little bit weird because their wide receivers were absolutely decimated. But I think like David Njoku and probably even Harrison Bryant for that matter are going to be like, they're going to be involved in this offense, especially in the passing game. They brought in Amari Cooper. Jarvis Landry is going to be a free agent or he's a free agent and he's looking for somewhere else. So behind Amari Cooper, David Njoku looks like he's kind of the second in line for targets, and he is 100% talented enough to get it done. So I think taking that shot on David Njoku could pay off large, and you could find yourself with a fringe tight end one this year. I could see him sneaking in there with a big upside season because he is quite the athlete. We just haven't seen that necessarily come to fruition. So maybe he's going to do the reverse Evan Engram, where Evan Engram broke out as a rookie and then just shit beds. David Njoku has been disappointing, so maybe he's just going to come up, and I guess maybe it would be a Devontae Parker at the tight end position that he would be pulling here with David Njoku. So the other guy I talked about really, really under the radar was Robert Tonyan. And I think y'all must have forgot that Bobby Tons was a huge asset in 2020 fantasy leagues. Now, last year coming into the season, 2021, he was huge fade for a lot of people, and that was completely fair. He was kind of like a middling volume tight end who just scored 11 touchdowns. And so he finished as the tight end 5, which 11 touchdowns will essentially do that for a tight end. That's what the landscape looks like. But I mean, this is the Packers offense, and I think if you look at it, he's turning into one of those better late round tight ends because Devontae Adams is gone. He had a red zone target magnet around him where he would just vacuum the ball in like a Dyson once they got inside the 20, and now he's gone and he's not there. And when you look at this wide receiver depth chart, we're looking at Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb, Amari Rodgers. These guys are not guys that are screaming, give me the rock. These are guys that are going to be role players. And no, I don't think the Green Bay Packers are done at the wide receiver position, but I don't think that there's really that many options for them to, stock up 2 to 3 high-level guys. So I think maybe they bring in one high-level guy, if maybe a rookie, maybe it's like a Brandon Cooks trade target or something like that. But I think second and third on this priority list is up for grabs in Green Bay, and Robert Tonyan has previous chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, and I think he could be in line for a bounce back to challenge for those fringe tight end 1 numbers, because he is in line for that spike touchdown season like we saw a couple years ago, and that's great, but he's also in line for some more volume. So you're not just necessarily betting on the touchdown spike, because if that's what we were doing and Devontae Adams was there, I would not be on Robert Tonyan quite as much, but I think he's a guy who's going to pay off on that investment for sure. Okay, the last 2 guys, I'm just going to be quick on these 2. AlieCox and Cameron Brate. They are the 2 other guys who kind of returned to their previous team. Of the 2, I think I'm going to take the upside shot on Ali. For Brate, we all kind of expect Rob Gronkowski to be back in Tampa Bay, and I think that's obviously a big hit to Brate's receiving potential. I think Brate will be out there to do some blocking, and I really like Cameron Brate as a tight end. Free Cameron Brate, no doubt. But keep an eye on him as a streamer, I guess, because Gronk does get hurt from time to time, and Brate can hold his own. We've seen little bits and pieces of chemistry with Tom Brady, and the Bucs were top half of the league in 2 tight end sets last season. So I'd classify him as about a streamer to monitor, but not really a guy that I'm going to be drafting in Cameron Brate. When you look at AlieCox, though, he just got an upgrade at quarterback with Matt Ryan, who previously has, he's known how to feed the tight end. Decent year with Kyle Pitts, of course. Tony Gonzalez days of yore were fantastic for us fantasy managers, so we really like that spot. We're looking at the path to targets for AlieCox, and it's at this very moment Michael Pittman and pretty much nothing else. The ghost of Paris Campbell is still there, and there is some talent there, but that's a hard one to dive into for me after so many years of disappointment for Paris Campbell. And AlieCox is an athletic monster. He always has profiled as a very good red zone weapon, and that's what we're looking for these dart throw tight ends. Is there a path to targets? And does this guy have the prowess to score touchdowns if called upon? That's the 2 things that I'm looking for in streaming and late tight ends. Path to targets, and can this guy score touchdowns? And that's what you have in AlieCox if these dominoes fall the right way for him. So I'm going to get into some guys who changed teams, which is maybe a little bit more exciting here. I do want to give a shout out to our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. The best ball drafts are live and loaded right now. I've done a bunch already this season. They've got all sorts of sports that you can get into drafts as well. They've got props over there, all sorts of stuff. So go check out Underdog Fantasy. They are a huge name in the best ball space, and they have one of the most user-friendly platforms. Really, really sharp users on the platform, and a lot of fun just throwing down a little bit of cheddar with the chance to win some cheddar towards the end of the season with those best ball leagues. So Underdog Fantasy, you can use our promo code TNFF, and you will get an instant match on your first deposit up to $100. So drop 100, you get 200. You can lay some money down and you can multiply it by a lot over on Underdog Fantasy. So big thanks to them. We're super stoked to have them on board as a sponsor of the show, and we're having lots of fun playing over on that platform as well. So thank you for supporting us by going over there and playing on Underdog Fantasy. It's much appreciated. Okay, guys, the next guy we're going to talk about changed teams. This is one of the guys who changed teams via trade, and he was probably one of the biggest non-beneficiaries of the Russell Wilson trade, and that would be Noah Fant. Poor guy got to watch a shiny new quarterback top tier quarterback, in fact, walk right past him at the airport while him and his buddy Drew are on their way to the Pacific Northwest to get rained on. Yeah, I mean, Noah Fant took quite the hit there. We were, before the trade details came out, it was questionable whether Noah Fant was involved in there, and everybody was like, Noah Fant to the moon, folks. But then he was involved in the trade, and here we are. He's in Seattle, and he's got a new reality. So for 2022, I have him as my tight end 14, so just outside top 12. I think he's an uber talented player, can get it done after the catch. Hasn't been historically a red zone weapon, but I think he's got the size to potentially do some of that if he's used correctly down near the goal line. I'm not sure I would trust Pete Carroll to use guys correctly down near the goal line, but that remains to be seen. So like I said, tight end 14 in my early best ball rankings, which are kind of like my early version of 2022 rankings. So keep an eye out for that stuff on the site. But yeah, I got him right behind the aforementioned Robert Tonyan. He's at 13. And then Albert O I have right at tight end 12 for that upside shot. So Noah Fant is just outside that tight end 1. And you look at the Seahawks, and they have been known to target tight ends in the past. We saw that solid little Will Disley year before the injury bug started to hit him. We were super hyped for some Gerald Everett last season, but that didn't necessarily pan out. I think injuries were a factor there, but he wasn't really targeted that much when he was on the field either. So it kind of remains to be seen whether the Seahawks are an offense where we're looking at the tight end. And I don't think it is where we are. I think Noah Fant is definitely a couple steps above Will Disley and Gerald Everett as far as talent, obviously. And we know that he's put in some work with Drew Lock and got a little bit of chemistry there last year with the Denver Broncos. He averaged 2 more PPR points per game with Drew Lock as his quarterback than any other quarterback. But if you dive a little deeper into that, those 2 points came from just like 10 more yards per game, which is okay, and just a little bit better touchdown pace in what was a bad touchdown year for Noah Fant. So that kind of coincides with him not necessarily being a big red zone weapon. Like, he has to make big plays happen if he's going to score these touchdowns, and it is really hard to bet on a tight end making frequent big plays happen. This is going to be a run-heavy offense. They got Rashad Penny coming back. Chris Carson is coming back, not to mention, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, I think they're a studly wide receiver pairing, but I think they fit pretty well with what Drew Lock likes to do as far as toss up some YOLO balls. I mean, DK Metcalf is ideal for that, and Lockett doesn't get enough credit as a downfield receiver because I think he can do that really, really well as well. I think he might have led the league in deep targets last year, but don't quote me on that necessarily, but I think he might have, if not the year before. But give Lockett some respect. Put a little bit of respect on that man's name, you know what I'm saying? So I don't necessarily think Noah Fant has a clear path to targets. Not clear enough for me. Like, I think third on the target totem pole is great, but third on the target totem pole in Seattle isn't necessarily as great. So I'm not able to put him in the front of that fringe tight end 1 tier. I think he's more near the back. Like, I'm even contemplating moving him back just a little bit. So beware a little bit of Noah Fant, but you might get stuck in a situation. We live in Seahawks country here out in Western Canada, and people love them some Seahawks. So I imagine in some of my home leagues, I won't even have to think about Noah Fant because he'll probably be overdrafted by my league mates, to which I am thankful for that. So if any of you are listening, just draft Noah Fant. Okay, we're rolling here. We're rolling. Couple more to dive into. I want to talk a little Austin Hooper. We talked David Njoku, and the guy who kind of cleared his path up is Austin Hooper, and he moves over to the Tennessee Titans. I don't love this one either. Sure, the path looks okay. He looks like he's going to be third on the target totem pole behind AJ Brown and Robert Woods. But the Titans last year had the 7th fewest pass attempts in the entire league, and their offense will remain centered around Derrick Henry. And this offense has been like routinely some of the lowest passing attempts in the NFL over the past few seasons with Ryan Tannehill, and that's not necessarily going to change because they got to ride Derrick Henry out because that's the guy that's going to get it done for them, and he has in the past. Of course, he was injured last season, but he was on a crazy pace before that injury. So Derrick Henry, I think, is definitely a bounce-back candidate for 2022. As far as the pass catchers, they did bring in Robert Woods, like I said, to team up with A.J. Brown, the God, and those two guys figure to take on a majority of the work for me inside the 20s. I think, they're both yards after the catch studs. So I think as far as Hoop Daddy goes, the best we can really expect is a spike touchdown season, which we've seen. We saw in that season with the Atlanta Falcons, a bit of a spike touchdown season, but that was a far different passing offense that has far different upside for players. So I wouldn't even be thinking about that in my evaluation of Austin Hooper. He did it 2 years ago, means nothing to me. For most guys, let alone Austin Hooper's kind of a poster boy for that in this situation, because these things are not like the other. So if you're betting on a spike touchdown season from Austin Hooper, you're betting on a really efficient touchdown season from Ryan Tannehill, and I'm not really inclined to do that. I think the loss of Arthur Smith last season sapped a ton of that efficiency from this Titans offense. And if you look, Ryan Tannehill had 30 fewer play action passes. Doesn't seem like very much over the course of a season. That's like less than 2 per game fewer, but that was to the tune of 400 fewer passing yards, which is not insignificant whatsoever, especially in such a low passing offense. So beware of Austin Hooper. I said beware of Noah Fant. Beware of Austin Hooper. I think in his tier, there's way better guys to be looking at, like a guy like Cole Kmet, Logan Thomas for the Commanders, or even the next guy that I'm going to talk about here, actually, in Gerald Everett. Gerald Everett is a guy that I've really liked over the last little bit. One of those uber athletic tight ends, just needs to land in the right spot, and he has that explosion potential. Well, lo and behold, the guy goes to the Los Angeles Chargers, and pardon the pun, but I don't think there's many landing spots that are more electric than Los Angeles with Justin Herbert. They are a high flying offense. Like I said, they have that young stud quarterback and a great wide receiver core around Gerald Everett. Of course, like, I might be off on this after the season ends, and he could disappoint for probably like the 4th season in a row, and I have felt that heartbreak in the past, but he's a guy who I'm ready to feel that heartbreak again, because his profile, the offense that he plays in, the cost that it's going to take to get him is something that I'm totally willing to be wrong on this season. So if you punt the tight end position, take a shot on Gerald Everett. I mean, I get it. The path does not look very good. It looks pretty murky with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Of course, Austin Eckler loves him some Tarjays. And then you got Josh Palmer and Jalen Guyton, who re-signed with the Chargers. So there definitely is a murkier path than some of these other guys. But of the players in kind of the tier of Gerald Everett, we know that none of them are going to be heavily targeted. And I think he's one of the better bets of that bunch to have a spiked efficiency season, even if he has low volume. The Chargers, they were middle of the pack last year with a 21% target share to tight ends, exact same percentage within the red zone. And I think, like, obviously not all of that is going to go to Gerald Everett. Donald Parham re-signed with the team as well. So I think a little bit will get siphoned off to him, and he is a monster himself. Very athletic tight end. Good, like, dynasty stash if you got deep benches for sure, but I would take a shot on Gerald Everett if I punted the position this year, because I just want pieces of that Chargers offense. Okay, I think this is probably the last guy that I'm going to dive into a little bit deeply, and then I'll just rattle off a couple names before we ride her out here. Thanks for sticking around. Going to be a bit of a shorter episode just because I am flying solo, and I don't want to make you, listen to my voice and look at my ugly mug for too long today. But the last guy I'll talk about is Evan Engram. Signs with the Jaguars. They went on quite the spending spree, did the Jacksonville Jaguars, trying to retool around Trevor Lawrence is the guy's name that I'm looking for. And I think Evan Engram probably falls into that Gerald Everett tier for me. I think he's got the pedigree to be maybe a tier above that. And we've seen him, in his rookie season, had a great year. But I think he still falls in that mid-range tight end too for me. If we see a bunch of chemistry and a bunch of usage moving through the offseason with Trevor Lawrence, then yeah, I might put him in that fringe tight end 1 group. But right now he's in the mid-range tight end 2 group. Mega good athlete, got that young quarterback, so things we like. And then Doug Peterson has heavily involved tight ends in his offenses in the past. We saw actually last year, obviously this wasn't Doug Peterson, but this was Trevor Lawrence throwing to Dan Arnold between weeks 8 and 10. Dan Arnold had 26 targets. So that's a pretty heavy load for a tight end with a rookie quarterback over a 3-week stretch. Super small sample, but I think tight ends have always been very friendly for young quarterbacks. And then if you look at the path for the Jags, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, Marvin Jones is still there. Travis Etienne figures to get some passing work, but none of those wide receivers that I mentioned really scream 150 target threats. Like, I don't think Christian Kirk is that guy. And if they force 150 targets to him, I think we're going to be a little bit disappointed. Zay Jones was overpaid in my book. I like the player, but I don't like him at $10 million a year for 3 seasons. That to me screams that he's going to be heavily involved. And I think this is a guy that you want sporadically involved in your offense as opposed to heavily involved in your offense. So it remains to be seen how these wide receivers produce, because I thought those moves were pretty subpar, to be honest. But I think that's all pretty good for Evan Engram. Like, he doesn't have that screaming alpha within this offense. So he could turn into a little seam threat and have one of those efficiency seasons at the tight end position that gets him, in that top 12 of tight ends. So as you can see, kind of a theme throughout all of this is that the fringe tight end 1 group can be as big or as small as you really want it to. There's paths for all of these guys. There's arguments to be made for all of these guys. And I don't think that's necessarily a testament to the tight ends themselves. I think it's a testament to the tight end landscape more so that any of these guys, one of these guys has 3 pop-off weeks in the middle of the season, and that could sneak him into the back of the top 12, even if the other 14 of his games are a little bit subpar. So if you're waiting on tight ends, these are some guys that you're going to want to get because there is some upside. A couple other names here before we ride out. I'm gonna wrap her up. Ricky Seals-Jones is a guy who I've loved, another one of those super athletic guys to the Giants to replace Evan Engram. We've seen them give volume to the tight end position, but I love the Brian Daboll hire actually, but I just can't buy in. It's like Brian Daboll is like a Cadillac coach and he's rolling into a team full of Pintos. You know what I mean? So I really, I'm a little bit conflicted on this team. I'm not ready to buy into him just yet. Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor do not inspire me at the quarterback position. The only piece I'm really attacking out of this offense is probably Saquon Barkley, maybe peppering in a little bit of Kadarius Toney from time to time if I can get him on the cheap, but I think he's probably going to rise up the ranks as well after a stellar efficiency season last year on limited work. So Ricky Seals-Jones, more of a streamer to monitor. Don't draft him in your 2022 leagues. If you are in your best ball leagues and you punted the tight end position and you need a third one in the final round of your draft, sure, go grab RSJ. Love me some RSJ. Another guy that falls into that category, but an absolute different player, is Hayden Hurst to Cincinnati. That's an offense that we want pieces of. We saw CJ Uzomah be useful towards the end of the season. Hayden Hurst is going to be on the field a lot because the guy can do some blocking. So I'm very curious to see how that shakes out, but it looks like Hayden Hurst could come in and be on the field a lot in a high-powered offense that we are targeting. So yeah, Hayden Hurst is another one of those kind of punt the tight end position and just pick a guy up to give you some spot starts. You could even, like on your deep dynasty benches, get him and like a Seals-Jones and an Evan Engram and just do some streaming from within. I like to do that from time to time if I'm a little bit dumpy at the tight end position, but I don't want to sink other assets into beefing up that position on my team. I think you can get by that way by having 3 to 4 of these dart throw guys on a deep bench that you can stream from within. So a couple other names: OJ Howard, former heartthrob of the True North Fantasy Pod, especially my co-host Tyrell McLaughlin, did not pan out in Tampa Bay, unfortunately, but he goes to Buffalo. I am very curious to see the Brian Daboll effect in Buffalo. Talked about Arthur Smith leaving the Tennessee Titans. Now, that was a low volume, high efficiency offense. The Buffalo Bills were kind of a higher volume, higher efficiency offense with that rushing from Josh Allen. So I'm curious to see the effect on that offense of Brian Daboll leaving. Obviously, we saw that big spike season from Dawson Knox, not somebody I necessarily believe in myself. So I think if Dawson Knox misses some time or if he sees some subpar play, we could see OJ Howard get a little chance to flash in there. So keep an eye out on that for your dynasty leagues, because, that's a guy that you could go have as a throw in a trade who could have a little bit of upside if he gets a shot with this Josh Allen offense, because, we saw what Josh Allen did for Dawson Knox last year, and I would put OJ Howard as a better talent than Dawson Knox, even though I think Dawson Knox is a good talent. I've just not previously thought this was a great situation in Buffalo for tight ends, but we saw that was a little bit better last year. So I have to kind of be water to what we've seen. So OJ Howard, he's a backup tight end right now. Do not invest in him, but keep an eye on him for the fact that he has the talent to be an upside tight end in a great offense. Last two, Tyler Conklin, CJ Uzomah went to the New York Jets. I'm not investing in a New York Jets tight end. Elijah Moore, Michael Carter, that is about it for me for the New York Jets. And yeah, Tyler Conklin. And I think Uzama probably gets the starts over Conklin. And he probably will have a couple flash games where he is useful for fantasy. So Uzama would be the streamer I would take out of those two. But I think the winner out of that is Irv Smith with Tyler Conklin leaving Minnesota. Irv Smith's going to get some more run in Minnesota. And I have him as right around that back end tight end 1 area as well. I think he's probably top 15 tight end just inside there for me. So that's what I got for the tight ends, guys. I hope I did the rundown justice. I missed my man Tyrell McLaughlin. It's always fun to bounce stuff off of him and see his opinions on these guys, but that's why I saved the quarterbacks and the running backs. So keep an eye out for next week for us to record those and get those posted. Another big thanks to our friends at fantasypoints.com. Go check it out. That prospect guide is so awesome. It's so in-depth on all of these rookies. And actually, Joe Dolan and Greg Cosell on the Fantasy Points YouTube channel just today did a show running through some of those rookies. And I'm going to fire that up shortly after this, and I'm excited to dive in. And then Graham, Scott, Wes, and Dave Holden from PFF did an early rookie roundtable yesterday that's on the YouTube channel for Fantasy Points. So go check them out. We love those guys. They're some of our favorite analysts who I think have grown into, friends of ours essentially who we chat with and support and whatnot. So we really appreciate the Fantasy Points team. And then thanks to Trophy Smack, Monkey Knife Fight, Underdog Fantasy, and Viridian Global, where you can get some sick swag like that, maybe a little something like that, which I'm rocking on my head. Go to Viridian Global, check out all the brands in the Football Collective. You will not regret it. They have kick-ass threads, kick-ass designs, and it's all run by great people who are actually 2 of my best friends in the fantasy football space. So please go check out Viridian Global and support those guys because they're doing a lot of good work. And if it wasn't for them, all these brands in the Fantasy Football Collective would not be able to represent their brand the way that they do. So I just wanted to give some love to Will and Mark over at Viridian Global because I know they've been doing a lot of work for the fantasy community, and I think sometimes they don't get the thanks that they deserve for what they've done for all these brands. So please go check them out. And yeah, just let's ride into this season. We're having a lot of fun through the off season, getting into our best ball leagues, evaluating our dynasty teams, getting ready for our redraft leagues. It's going to be a ton of fun. We are rolling with True North Fantasy Football. Make sure you subscribe to that YouTube channel. We got the Gold Jacket Pod weekly. The Point After is taking a little bit of a break right now. The boys are taking an off-season break, but that is all good. Jules and Craig will be back in short order. Yeah, TNFF Network on YouTube, putting a lot of work into the short clips as well. So please subscribe, hit the little bell to get the notifications. And we really appreciate likes and comments on the video. Comment and let us know what you think. We want to get connected with the people who listen and like our shows. So please do that. Follow us at True North FFB on Instagram and Twitter, and check out the site at truenorthffb.com. Until next week, I am Trav, and I say peace.